This is Alex with Trajectory Arms. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that has been beat to death on the internet forums and Facebook groups since those platforms have been available. That subject is castle nut torquing and staking. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to demonstrate how we do it. I think there are enough good resources out there of how to do this properly, but I am going to talk about how the system works and why we do what we do. So, this system actually works by providing force, clamping force, or tension between the receiver and the castle nut across the receiver extension or buffer tube, if you will. That torque or the tension there and the friction keeps this from rotating and coming loose. There is a misconception out there that the index tab on the end plate and this groove in the receiver extension is what keeps it from moving, and that's actually not correct. It's more of a assembly aid than anything. So if you notice on this one was actually not torqued properly, and it didn't have enough clamping pressure, so when an external force on the stock was applied, it allowed it to turn and destroy the threads on the receiver extension. So this is not a very good method of retention, and so we need to make sure that the primary method doesn't fail. So what we're trying to do, like I said, we're trying to maximize the clamping pressure throughout this assembly. The way that works is we're going to use the 38 to 42 pounds of torque applied to this to clamp that down. So the torque does not equal clamping force. Torque is just the method that we choose to measure this system by. So the biggest issue, though, is that there is friction in threaded objects. So bolts or any sort of threaded assembly, you're going to have friction. So we want to reduce the amount of friction to increase the amount of clamping force. We do that by using grease or oil in some cases, but on this one, the grease works really well. The grease, Aeroshell 64, or formerly known as 33 MS. The grease has molybdenum disulphide, which works as a solid lubricant and helps us remove this system later on down the road if we need to. So it keeps corrosion and other junk out of the threads. So we're going to grease that up, which reduces the friction on the nut itself and allows us to maximize the clamping pressure here. If we apply too much torque to the threads, the steel castle nut's going to win and it's going to ruin the threads on the receiver extension. So that torque spec is sort of ideal where the system has enough clamping pressure to do its job without destroying the threads. Now the problem with this, and I'll demonstrate this, if I apply some torque to this and then all of a sudden I drop my gun and the stock rotates, it's going to apply twisting force to this and it can cause this system to break loose. Now if you notice that when I went this way, the nut didn't go anywhere, but when it went this way, it actually loosened the nut. And if I wiggle it a couple times, you can see that clamping pressure is completely gone. The castle nut has basically become useless and this thing has failed. So there is a method that we can use to prevent that system from failing, and that is the staking. The stake provides a physical barrier that the castle nut has to overcome in order to back off. And we do this twice at a minimum. The forward controls design castle nut can actually be staked 3 times if it's timed right. but 2 is the minimum and all that is necessary. So this system, the torque spec is enough to keep it from moving, but it isn't enough to keep it from backing off if enough external force is applied. So the staking allows us to get the ideal amount of clamping pressure and prevents this thing from coming loose until someone with a wrench intentionally comes and breaks through that physical barrier. So it's very important that you do stake it. It's important that you grease the threads and torque this properly. And if everything is done well, this thing will never come loose until you're ready to do it with the proper tools.